The Vanishing, the palace of the alien queen, was a fortress of steel and crystal, standing high above the clouds of her homeworld. But on that night the strong walls could not protect her heart. The queen walked quickly through the grand halls, her long dark robes dragging across the floor, her golden crown trembling as her hands shook. Her daughters were missing. She had left them in the royal chamber, guarded by the strongest soldiers in the empire. Yet when she returned, the room was empty. The windows wide open, the curtains moving in the cold night wind, the beds cold. At first the queen thought it was a mistake. She thought the girls had wandered into the gardens or had gone to play with their caretakers. But when the guards reported they had seen nothing, fear spread through her chest like fire. The daughters of the queen were not ordinary children. They were heirs of the throne, the future rulers of a fierce empire. Their safety was worth more than entire planets, and now they had vanished without a single trace. "Search every hall, every corridor, every corner of the palace," the queen's voice thundered, her words shaking the hearts of every servant and guard. Soldiers ran in every direction, their boots echoing. Drones scanned the skies, and searchlights swept across the dark gardens. Still nothing was found. The queen stood in the middle of her throne room, her claws digging into the armrest, her eyes glowing red with anger and despair. She could command entire fleets to burn worlds, but in that moment, she could not command the return of her children, and that powerlessness made her tremble. Whispers started to spread among the courtiers. Some said rival clans had stolen the girls. Others feared that assassins had slipped through the palace shields. A few even dared to whisper a forbidden idea, that perhaps the daughters had left on their own. But no one spoke that thought loudly, for fear of the queen's wrath. Then a soldier entered, bowing low, his armor clinking. "My queen," he said, "there is a rumor." One of the outer guards saw a strange figure near the royal gardens. A human. The room fell silent. A human here in the heart of the empire, in the most guarded palace in the galaxy. How could that be possible? The queen's eyes narrowed, her chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. "Bring me that human," she ordered, her voice sharp like a blade. "Alive!" The guards rushed out, the palace filled with noise again. But inside the queen's heart there was only a growing storm. She remembered the stories of humans, strange, stubborn creatures from a distant death world, despised by many, underestimated by others, but dangerous in ways no one fully understood. Could it be that such a creature had stolen her daughters? The queen's claws tapped against her throne, her thoughts turning darker. "If he has harmed them," she whispered to herself, "not even his ashes will remain." Hours passed like years, the search spreading beyond the palace into the shadowed city below. The night air grew colder. The torches and lights burned brighter, yet still the daughters were nowhere to be found. The queen walked into their chamber once more. Her hand touching the empty beds, she remembered their laughter, their small hands holding hers, their bright eyes looking up at her without fear. And now the silence of the room was heavier than 1,000 battles. Her people had seen her as unshakable, as a storm no one could stand against. But tonight her eyes burned not with rage alone, but with sorrow. Outside, a horn sounded, the signal of the guards. They had found something. The queen rose from her throne with such force the hall trembled. Her voice roared across the palace, "Bring it to me." The guards appeared again, but not with chains or a lifeless body. Their eyes were wide, their faces uncertain. One of them spoke carefully. "My queen, we found the human, but you must see with your own eyes what he holds." The queen's heart froze for a moment. Her chest tight, she stepped forward, her shadow stretching long across the glowing floor. Her guards moved aside, and in the distance, she saw the figure, a human lying against the wall of the garden tower, his arms curled protectively and upon his chest. Two small figures breathing softly, their faces calm, her daughters. The queen stopped in her tracks, her rage colliding with confusion. Her soldiers raised their weapons, but the children stirred, their tiny hands gripping the fabric of the human's shirt, refusing to let go for the first time in her life. The alien queen did not know whether to give the order to kill or to demand an answer. Her voice caught in her throat, and all around her the silence was louder than war drums. The vanishing was no longer just a mystery. It was the beginning of something even the fierce queen could not control. The garden tower was silent except for the soft breathing of the alien queen's daughters. The sight froze every soldier in place. None dared to move, not even the queen herself. The human sat there with his back against the cold stone, his eyes closed in exhaustion, his arms wrapped protectively around the two alien children as if they were his own. His clothes were torn, his face scratched, yet there was no fear in his expression. Only calm. The queen's claws twitched at her side. Rage burned in her chest, but confusion pressed against it. She had expected to find a monster, a kidnapper, maybe even an assassin sent by her enemies. Instead, she found this human, sitting quietly with her daughters asleep on his chest. "Explain this," the queen's voice thundered. The ground itself seemed to shake. The daughters stirred but did not cry. They clung tighter to the human's shirt, their small bodies curling closer to him. The guards raised their weapons, waiting for the order to strike, but none came. The queen's eyes locked on the human's face. She wanted to see fear. She wanted to see guilt. But his eyes opened slowly, steady, calm. And he met her gaze without flinching. "I did not take them," he said, his voice tired but firm. "I found them." The queen's nostrils flared, her red eyes narrowing. "Lies, human. My daughters do not simply wander into the arms of strangers." Her voice was cold, sharp as ice. But the daughters stirred again. One of them mumbled softly in their alien tongue, "Safe," as she nestled closer to his chest. The word cut through the silence like a blade. The queen's heart, hardened by years of war and rule, stumbled for a moment. Her daughters had called no one safe but her before. Yet here they were, clinging to a fragile human as if he were their shield. The court gathered behind her, nobles and advisors whispering. Some demanded the human's immediate execution, others urged caution. One counselor hissed, "It is a trick, my queen." "He has bewitched them," another muttered. "Perhaps he is bait, meant to break your heart before striking." The queen raised her hand and silence fell, her eyes never leaving the human. "If you found them," she said slowly, "then tell me, where and how?" The human shifted carefully so as not to wake the children. His voice remained steady. "I heard them crying near the old garden well. Alone and frightened, no guards, no caretakers, nothing but shadows around them. I could not leave them there." His words carried no fear, only a strange honesty. The queen hated it. She wanted to crush it. But every time she looked at her daughters sleeping peacefully, her fury weakened. "Why did they trust you?" the queen demanded, her voice breaking slightly. "They fear even their own guards, yet they lay upon you as though you were blood." The human looked down at the children, his hand gently resting on one's shoulder. "I sang to them. I told them stories until their tears stopped. I kept them warm when the night grew cold. Maybe that is why." The queen's claws dug into her palms. Part of her wanted to scream, to strike him down where he sat. But another part of her, the part that had kissed those children's foreheads at night, knew he was speaking truth. Her advisors grew restless. "End him." "My queen," one shouted, "do not let this poison spread." Another yelled, "He is human, nothing good can come of this." The queen turned, her cape flowing, her eyes blazing. "Silence," she roared, her voice echoing across the halls. The nobles bowed their heads, the guards lowered their weapons, but their eyes remained on the strange human. She stepped closer, her towering figure casting a long shadow over him. "If your words are true, then you will live long enough to prove them," she hissed. "But if you have deceived me, I will make sure your suffering becomes legend." The human did not look away. He nodded once. "I understand." The queen's daughters stirred again. One of them opened her small eyes, looking at her mother, then at the human. Her voice was soft, fragile. "Mama, don't take him away." The queen froze, her chest tightening. Every noble in the hall looked up in shock. Never before had the royal children spoken in defense of anyone outside their bloodline. The human whispered softly, "Rest, little ones," and again they closed their eyes. Safe in his arms, the queen turned sharply. Hiding the crack in her expression, she ordered her guards, "Take him to the lower chamber, keep him under watch. He will answer more questions when the sun rises." The soldiers moved, but they did not pull the daughters away. For every time they tried, the children cried and clung tighter, so in the end they carried the human as he held them. The image burned itself into the minds of everyone present. The heirs of the alien empire asleep on the chest of a human. As the queen walked back to her throne, her heart was a storm of fury, confusion, and fear. She had ruled for decades without doubt, but tonight, the sight of her daughters in the arms of a human shook her more than any war. The vanishing had been a mystery, but now a greater question had risen. Why did her daughters trust a human more than their own kind? And deep inside, though she would never admit it aloud, the queen feared the answer. The night did not bring peace to the alien queen. She sat alone in her throne room, the torches burning low, her claws scraping against the armrest of her seat, her mind boiling with rage and confusion. Her daughters were safe, yes, but they were not safe in her arms. They were safe in the arms of a human, and that truth cut deeper than any blade. She replayed the image in her mind again and again, their small heads resting on his chest, their tiny hands gripping his shirt, their soft voices calling him safe, and worst of all, begging her not to take him away. The queen slammed her fist against the throne, the sound echoing through the great hall. The stone cracked beneath her strength. Her guards flinched, though none dared to move. "How dare they?" she hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "How dare my daughters, heirs of the Empire, cling to a fragile outsider as if he were their protector, as if I could not shield them myself?" Her generals bowed before her, one speaking carefully. "My queen. The human is dangerous, he has bewitched the children. He must be executed at once," another added. "The court already whispers. They say the human's presence is a curse. They say the heirs will never again trust their own blood. If you allow this, the Empire will lose faith in you." The queen's eyes glowed brighter. She stood tall, her long robes flowing like rivers of fire. "Then let them whisper," she snarled. "Let them choke on their fear. I will decide what is to be done." She marched toward the lower chambers, her heavy steps shaking the ground. The guards opened the doors with trembling hands, and there, in the center of the cell, sat the human, still holding the daughters. The sight made her chest burn with fury. They should have been afraid of the dark, crying for her, but instead they slept peacefully in the arms of this creature.
"As though he were their shield against all things, wake him," the queen commanded.
Her voice cold, the guard struck the bars. The human stirred, his eyes opening slowly. Still calm, still steady, he met her blazing gaze without fear. And that angered her even more. "You dare to hold what is mine," she spat, stepping closer. "You dare to touch my blood? To take their trust from me?" The human's voice was quiet but firm. "I did not take it, they gave it." The queen's breath caught for a moment, her claws curling tighter. The words struck her harder than she expected. She wanted to deny them, to silence him, but the memory of her daughters clinging to him made the truth too clear. "You think you are worthy?" she roared, her voice shaking the walls. "You think your weak flesh, your fragile bones can protect what even my strongest soldiers could not?" The human did not move. He only lowered his eyes to the sleeping children. "I think they believe I can," he said simply. The queen's fury rose higher. The air around her grew heavy, sparks of energy crackling from her claws. The guard stepped back, afraid of what she might unleash. "Do you not fear death, human?" she growled, her voice like thunder. "I could tear you apart this very moment." The human looked up again, his gaze steady. "If it would keep them safe, then no." "I do not fear it," the queen froze. The fire in her chest flickered those words. They were words she herself had once spoken long ago, when she was only a warrior fighting to protect her people, before she became a queen, before the throne had hardened her heart. Her daughters stirred at the rising tension. One of them opened her sleepy eyes and whispered, "Mama." Before snuggling closer to the human, the queen felt her knees weaken. Though she did not let it show, her wrath was not gone, but it was now tangled with something else, doubt. Behind her, the nobles pressed their case. "Kill him now, my queen, before the children's minds are poisoned forever." Another hissed. "If you do not, your enemies will see this as weakness." The queen turned, her eyes blazing. "Weakness?" she roared. "You call it weakness that I think of my daughter's will, weakness that I listen to their voices? No, weakness is fearing what you do not understand. And I will not be ruled by fear." The hall went silent, the guards and nobles lowering their eyes. The queen stood tall once more, but inside her heart was a battlefield. She looked once more at the human, still calm, still holding what was most precious to her, and her wrath swelled again. But now it was not simple rage. It was the wrath of a mother who did not know if her enemy was truly an enemy. "Very well," she said finally, her voice low but sharp. "If you claim to be their protector, then you will prove it. You will face trials no outsider has ever survived, and if you fail, your bones will be dust in my halls." The human nodded once. "Without hesitation, I will." The queen turned, her robes sweeping the ground like storm clouds. Her wrath still burned, but in its flames something new was growing, something far more dangerous than hate. For the first time, the alien queen did not know if she wished for the human to fail or to survive, and that thought alone terrified her. The dawn came slowly over the alien capital, the skies burning red and gold. Yet inside the palace there was no peace. The queen had not slept, her eyes heavy but sharp, her mind storming with questions. The human was alive, held in the lower chambers under heavy guard. Her daughters still refused to let go of him, their small bodies curled against his side. Even in the dim torchlight of the prison, they had slept peacefully. This sight gnawed at the queen. Again and again she asked herself, why him, why a human, why not her guards? Why not her, their own mother by mid-morning? She summoned him to the judgment hall, the chamber where truth was pulled from liars. The ceiling was high, filled with carved symbols of war and power. The queen sat upon her throne, her gaze sharp. The court gathered in tense silence. The human was brought in, still holding the daughters. The soldiers had tried to separate them, but their cries shook the palace, and in the end they let him carry them. The image was shocking, almost unholy to the nobles. Royal heirs in the arms of a fragile outsider. The queen leaned forward, her voice low but full of weight. You will speak now, human, and you will tell me the truth. How did you find them? How did they come to trust you? And what do you want in return? The human looked up, his face tired yet calm. I told you before. I found them near the old garden well. They were alone, afraid, no one around. I stayed because no one else came. The queen's eyes narrowed. And how do you expect me to believe that my palace is guarded by thousands? How could they have wandered off without notice? He shook his head. I don't know. Maybe someone wanted them lost. Maybe the guards failed, but what I know is this: they were crying. And I could not walk away. The words hung in the air. Simple, without trick. But still the queen did not want to believe. One of the nobles shouted, Lies! He lured them out. He must have. No royal blood would cling to a stranger without reason. Another hissed. He is using them as a shield, my queen. Kill him before it is too late. The queen raised her hand. Silence returned. Her gaze drilled into him. Then prove it. Prove you did not steal them. Prove it with truth no lie can cover. At her signal, a priest of the old ways stepped forward, carrying the orb of echoes, an ancient relic that glowed with the power of memory. It was said to reveal the truth hidden in one's mind, no matter how well buried. The human did not resist as the orb was placed before him. Its light spilling across his face, the court leaned forward in silence. The queen's claws gripped her throne tighter. The orb shimmered, then images filled the air. Glowing shapes of memory. The daughters' small figures appeared, alone by the garden well, crying in the dark, their voices calling for help. Then the memory shifted. The human appeared, walking slowly, crouching low so as not to scare them, his hands open, his voice soft. He spoke gently, though they could not understand his language. Still the children crawled into his arms, their tears slowing, their heads resting against him. He rocked them carefully, then sang. Simple, quiet sounds, not words of power, not spells, just a tune from his heart. The court gasped. The queen herself felt her breath catch. The memory showed no trick, no abduction, only kindness. The orb faded, the chamber silent, every noble staring wide-eyed. The queen's daughters stirred, blinking awake, and in their innocent voices, they whispered safe as they hugged him tighter. The queen's heart wavered. She looked at her advisors, but their faces were pale, speechless. The truth had spoken louder than their doubts. The human raised his eyes to her, his voice steady. I do not want your throne. I do not want power. I want nothing. I only wanted them safe. That is all. The queen felt torn apart. Her pride screamed to call him liar. Her fury demanded punishment. But her heart, the heart of a mother, saw her daughter's trust, saw the truth shining clear. She stood slowly, her robes falling like waves around her. The truth has spoken, she declared, her voice echoing through the hall. He did not steal them. He did not harm them. He protected them when no one else did. The nobles erupted. Shouts of protest filled the chamber. This is madness. One cried, humans cannot be trusted. Another yelled, he is weak, unworthy. The queen roared, her voice drowning them out. Silence. You call him weak. Yet he did what my strongest failed to do. You call him unworthy. Yet my daughters call him safe. Who among you can deny that? The chamber fell quiet. No one dared to speak. The queen's eyes returned to the human, but her voice softened. Still human. You walk a dangerous path. The court will never accept you. My enemies will seek your blood if you stay. You will face trials beyond imagination. The human nodded once. If it means they are safe, I will face them. The queen felt her chest tighten again. Her wrath had not vanished, but it was no longer clear. It was mixed with something far more dangerous, respect. The truth was revealed, but with it came a storm, one that would shake the empire to its very core. The queen's decision shook the empire like an earthquake. Her words had spared the human, but in doing so, she had split her court in two. The nobles who stood behind her throne for decades now looked at her with doubt in their eyes. The warlords who once knelt proudly now whispered behind closed doors, and even her most trusted generals hesitated when she passed. In the shadowed halls of the palace, where secrets moved faster than light, the name of the human echoed like a warning. Some called him a liar who fooled the queen. Others called him a weapon planted by her enemies, and a few, a very small few, began to call him something far more dangerous, protector. Inside the nursery chamber, the daughters of the queen laughed freely. For the first time in many moons, they were smiling, their alien toys scattered across the soft floor, and in the center sat the human, letting them braid small flowers into his hair. He never asked for power, never demanded anything, but still, his presence was changing everything. Outside the chamber, 2 guards stood watch, whispering under their breath. "This is madness," one said. "He should be in chains, not playing with royalty." "He passed the orb of echoes," the other replied. "What if the stories are true? What if the stars chose him?" Their words were not alone throughout the empire. Voices clashed. Some wanted him gone, erased from history. Others wondered if he was part of a bigger prophecy yet unseen. The queen sat in her private chamber, surrounded by her inner circle, maps and reports covering the table before her. Her generals spoke with loud voices. "He must be removed," said General Varkas, slamming a fist on the table. "Every moment he breathes, he weakens your rule." High Priestess Nevria nodded. "The people talk, my queen. They say your judgment is clouded by emotion, that the human has softened your mind." The queen's eyes flared, her voice cold. "Speak carefully, priestess, or you may find out how sharp my mind still is." Nevria lowered her gaze, but the tension in the room grew heavier. Another voice broke the silence. It was Counselor Thren, older and softer spoken. "But perhaps we should not ignore what the children see." "My queen," he said carefully, "your daughters are of royal blood, yet they choose the human's presence, even over yours." The room fell into stunned silence, as if the words were poison. "How dare you suggest he is more fit than their own mother?" roared General Varkas, standing tall. "I said no such thing." Thren replied calmly. "I only ask, why? Why do the heirs of the most powerful queen in the galaxy find comfort in the arms of a human with no title, no weapons, no power?" The queen said nothing, but inside her heart the question burned. She had asked herself the same many times, and never found a satisfying answer. Later that evening, the queen walked alone toward the garden tower, the place where the human had first been found with her daughters. The wind whispered through the trees and the moonlight painted shadows on the path. She stopped at the old stone well, placing her clawed hand on its rim. Her mind filled with memories, her childhood, her rise to power, the battle she had won, the walls she had built around her heart. She whispered to the wind, "Have I ruled with strength or fear?" A soft voice came from behind. "They don't fear you." She turned sharply. The human stood there. Keeping a respectful distance, the children had been put to sleep, and he had stepped outside to breathe. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, bowing slightly. "I just needed air." The queen studied him carefully. His presence was still unsettling, yet no lies rested on his face. She asked quietly, "Why do they trust you?" He shrugged. "Maybe because I listen, maybe because I don't treat them like they're just heirs or future rulers. Maybe I just see them as children." The queen felt her heart twist again. Words she never thought she'd hear. He added softly, "I know I don't belong here, my queen. But they needed someone that night, and I was there. That's all." She looked away, her eyes on the moon above, her voice heavy. "You are tearing my court apart, human. They want your head. Some even whisper rebellion." "I never asked to be here," he replied. "But I won't run, not while they still feel safe." She turned to face him again, her voice firm but quieter than before. "If you stay, you'll face danger, more than just court politics. You may not live long enough to see another sunrise." He looked her in the eyes. "If it means they keep smiling, then I'll take that risk." The queen stared at him for a long moment, then without a word, turned and walked back into the palace, her heart divided like her court. The human had become more than a mystery, more than a guest. He was now the spark that could either heal her empire or destroy it. The next morning, the Queen stood on the balcony of the trial arena, her cape fluttering in the rising wind, her face expressionless as the drums of judgment echoed across the capital. Below, a massive crowd had gathered, nobles, soldiers, servants, even outsiders who had never stepped foot in the royal district before. All had come to witness what was now being called the human trial. The Queen had made her decision, but it was not easy. The court was broken. Whispers of rebellion grew louder. Some threatened to remove her if she let a human continue to influence the royal line. So she had made a choice not to execute him, but to test him, in front of all. If he failed, no one could question her judgment again. If he succeeded, well, she didn't want to think that far. In the center of the arena stood the human, dressed in light armor made by palace smiths. Nothing fancy, just enough to protect his fragile body. His face was calm, though his hands trembled slightly. He had not been told what the test would be, only that it would decide his fate. On the other side of the arena, a large metal gate began to rise, screeching as chains pulled it open, and from the darkness stepped out a creature that made the crowd gasp. A Tharvax beast, a predator from the ice worlds, twice the size of the human, with curved horns, armored skin, and eyes that glowed red with rage. The Queen had chosen the test personally, not out of cruelty, but clarity. If the human was truly a protector, if his bond with the royal heirs was real, then he would fight not just for survival, but for them. As the beast roared and charged forward, the human stood still, not with fear, but focus. He dodged the first charge, barely rolling out of the way. The crowd leaned in, breath held. He had no weapon, only his arms, his instincts, and a will that refused to break in the stands. The Queen's daughters sat behind a protective shield, their faces full of fear. One of them shouted, "No, don't hurt him." But her voice was drowned by the sound of the roaring crowd. The human kept moving, using the beast's weight against it, dodging, jumping, scraping his knees against the sand. He didn't try to kill it, he only tried to survive. Minutes passed like hours. The Queen stood, watching closely, her expression unreadable, but inside, her heart beat faster than it had in years. Then the beast struck. Slamming its claw into the human's side, he flew back, hitting the arena wall with a painful crack. Blood stained the sand, and the crowd roared. Some cheered, others winced. He lay still for a moment. The beast snorted and charged again, but as it neared, the human rolled under it, grabbing a loose chain that had fallen from the wall, wrapping it around the beast's leg as it passed. The creature stumbled, crashing into a pillar. Dazed but not defeated, the human didn't wait. He crawled forward, gripping the chain, pulling with all his strength. Trying to trap the monster's leg, it roared, slashing its tail. But the chain tangled around its limbs, and with one last pull, the human yanked it down. The beast fell, roaring in fury but unable to stand. Silence fell. The arena stilled, and then thunderous cheers, even from those who wanted him dead. The human stood panting, bruised and bleeding, but alive. He did not raise his arms in victory. He only looked toward the royal balcony, toward the Queen, and then toward her daughters. They were crying, their little hands pressed against the glass, and the Queen felt something sharp pierce her heart. He had not fought for glory, not to win power. He had fought because he knew their eyes were watching. The Queen raised her hand, and the crowd went silent. She spoke not with rage, but with strength. "This human," she said, her voice steady, "has done what few ever have. He faced death, not for his own life, but for the safety of my daughters and the peace of this empire." She looked at the court, her voice louder now. "Some call him weak, but what is true strength? Is it power? Or is it the courage to protect without reward?" No one answered. She turned to the human. "You are not of my world, not of my people, but you have shown loyalty beyond blood. And so I grant you a choice." The crowd waited, stunned. "You may return to your world and live in peace, with riches given for your protection," she said, "or you may stay and continue to serve as their guardian, but know this. If you stay, you step into the heart of fire, where peace is rare, and danger always waits." The human looked at the daughters once more, then raised his voice, quiet but firm. "I'll stay." The Queen closed her eyes. Just for a moment, the court was divided, but her heart was no longer. The palace felt different now. The human had passed the trial, the impossible test, the one no outsider had ever survived before. He stood bloody, bruised, but unbroken, and he had chosen to stay, not for honor, not for gold, but for two small alien girls who now refused to let him out of their sight. And still, The empire trembled. The queen had not yet spoken her final decree, and until she did, the court remained tense. Her generals waited for orders, her priests waited for signs, and the people waited for a ruler's decision that could either calm the storm or start a new one. Inside her private chamber, the alien queen stood before a tall window, looking down at the courtyard. Her daughters were laughing with the human in the garden below, chasing fire lanterns as they floated through the air. The queen's heart ached. She had spent her life building power, ruling through strength, fear, and control. She had broken rebellions, crushed threats, and watched enemies bow before her. Yet she could not understand why her own children found comfort in the arms of a fragile being from a distant world. A knock echoed through the chamber. It was Counselor Thren, the old advisor who had once dared to suggest the human might be more than just a guest. "My queen," he said softly, "you must decide." She didn't turn, but her voice was low. "If I accept him, the court will see it as weakness. If I reject him, my daughters will never forgive me." Thren nodded. "Then perhaps, my queen, it is time to ask yourself, do you rule for your throne or for your blood?" The queen closed her eyes. His words struck deep, deeper than any speech from her generals that night. She called a royal assembly in the Hall of Judgment. The full court stood present, and above them, balconies were filled with citizens, all watching, all waiting. The human entered quietly, escorted by guards. The daughters clung to him as always, and as he stepped into the center of the chamber, gasps rose, not from fear, but from realization he had become a symbol, not just of survival, but of something rare in the empire. Compassion. The queen rose from her throne, her voice steady, powerful, but different this time, not sharp, not cold, but clear. "I have ruled this empire with strength," she began. "I have brought peace through war, order through control, and I have kept our people safe." She paused, letting her gaze move across the hall. "But strength is not always loud, and power is not always born from blood." She looked at the human, then at her daughters. "This being, this human, did not come to our world with armies. He came alone, and gave more than any warrior ever could. He protected what is most precious to me. Not because I ordered him, but because he chose to." The court listened, silent and still. "I do not care what the stars say, or what tradition demands," she continued. "Today, I make a new law, one not written in ancient scrolls, but carved in truth." She turned to the human, her voice softer now. "You are no longer a prisoner. You are no longer a stranger." She stepped forward, and for the first time in history, the alien queen lowered herself to one knee before a human. "You are their guardian," she said, "and if they trust you, so will I." The daughters ran to her, tears in their eyes, hugging both their mother and the human at once. The crowd could no longer stay silent. Cheers erupted, some in disbelief, others in joy. Even those who once shouted for the human's death now found themselves moved by what they had seen. And so the empire changed. The human was granted a title never given before, the Silent Shield, not a warrior by training but by heart. And though he held no weapon, all knew none would dare harm the heirs while he lived. Years passed, and though threats came, as they always do, the bond between the queen's daughters and the Silent Shield never broke. The queen herself softened over time, though never weak. She remained fierce, but wiser, her eyes still sharp but her heart more open. And in quiet moments, when no one watched, she would walk the gardens and smile as her daughters played, with the only protector she had not chosen, but had been chosen by fate.